We're brothers from other mothers, friends since dirt was brown. I'm Tim Hott, and conspicuous by his absence is Derek Tuttle. And this is Wrestling Buddies. Insert some music and some graphic of Tonka Wrestling Buddies with our heads on them. Or something like that. Anyways, this is the proof of concept episode for Wrestling Buddies. And this has been theoretically a long time in the making. I've wanted to do some type of project to just go back and watch old wrestling for quite a while and document it. And I watched some recent 1989 NWA, and there was so much going on at that time. And if you studied it at all, you know, owners were changing, bookers were changing, stories were changing, guys are coming in and out, and just when you get to like something, it goes away. But also exactly when you can't stand to see another second of something, it goes away. Everything is just kind of there and gone. And I thought it was so interesting when certain guys would debut or when certain moves would debut. And I was like, I really want to figure out a starting point to do this and do it. And I've been talking about it with Derek for a little while. I think the Shea Stadium show is the right place to start, and that would be the true pilot. But today we watched All-Star Wrestling from 1980. It would make sense if I would have written down and gotten the format to understand the exact date of said show. You get a graphic right off the bat from WWE saying this has been presented in its best possible format. Which you can imagine makes sense for tapes that at this point are 40 years old. They go into the opening with a song that I don't think is original, and I wanted to see, like, what was the original song for this? And on YouTube, I heard another equally generic, non-distinct song. So I thought maybe even the song I was listening to for the theme was a sound-alike to something else, and I was like, maybe this is what it took the place of. Tried to look it up on YouTube, found some clips of the opening. I mean, of course, opening themes can change in the course of 1 year, but I saw two other videos from 1980 that had a different theme, but not one that you'd think would be like a copyright concern or anything. So that mildly interesting to people like me. I don't know, maybe not to everybody else. But another thing I thought was interesting is when you watch the opener, it only features three superstars prominently. Ivan Putski right at the very beginning, Andre the Giant somewhat throughout, and Bob Backlund in there as well as the champion. So those are the three guys that, you know, it makes sense to watch out for. None of them are on this episode that we watched, but that's okay. Kicks off with Vince and Bruno, which is a crazy visual. I mean, like, when it comes, and of course I know that that's a thing, you know, but just it's still, to watch it is, when I came into wrestling, those two were very much estranged. Obviously they came back together to get Bruno in the Hall of Fame, but I still don't think it's, you know, necessarily a rosy relationship. But Bruno as a major star, we're still under Vince Sr. here, and his son do the commentary and Bruno do the commentary. But there they are together, really putting over Hulk Hogan, who we'll see on the show, and Larry Zbyszko. And I don't know what's weirder, hearing Hulk Hogan put over, or hearing Bruno Sammartino put over Hulk Hogan, or hearing Vince McMahon put over Larry Zbyszko. But both of them, you know, I found interesting. Another thing that's interesting is Vince McMahon says that this is discretionary viewer participation. So I guess, you know, on some level, it brought through a little bit of the realism of the show, you know, when it was a more sports-based presentation in the 80s. So, you know, who knows what these wrestlers will do or what you're deciding to agree to participate in viewing, you know, by the time that the show is over. I thought that was a neat little Easter egg type thing. Like, I mean, I think that I would enjoy if, you know, a promotion that's trying to have a little bit more retro feel would do something similar as a little callback. I don't know how much it would register with people, but having seen it just now, I thought it was cool. So the State Athletic Commission is there. They announce a number of different people, or the timekeeper, et cetera, et cetera. Zaharian is the steroid doctor from the 1993 trial. So interesting to hear him name dropped here. Another one of the referees is Dick Worley, who the first wrestling action figure line was the AWA Remco line, which included three referees. one of which was Dick Worley. So I don't know that I'd ever seen him perform before, but I have his action figure in my case, and so there you go. The ring is blue turnbuckles, white-ish or silver ropes. Didn't really tell on steps. It's a nice look. The room is well lit. You know, even back in 1980, WWE was producing nicer looking television than even maybe the NWA does. When I was watching 88 or 89, this has a certain aesthetic to it. You know, it's WWE, it's polished, it looks good. When you're putting together a wrestling show, I think that's an easy thing to take for granted and not care about or not have a budget for. But looking like you know what you're doing is maybe equally as valuable as actually knowing what you're doing, or more so, probably more so. The presentation meant a lot. First match, the Great Hossein, as it is pronounced by both Gary Michael Capetta, another little Easter egg, doesn't surprise in his pink suit here, in the ring announcing for the Great Hossein, who is listed on the script underneath for the network as the Great Hussein Arab. So those two things aren't jiving, but in fairness, if you watch Muda debut in 88, they call him Mota for weeks. So you wouldn't write Mota when people are trying to search, you know, to find. So I think they do have to kind of settle in on an identity for the most part. I guess potentially they could list them so you could hit them either way. But against one half of the tag team champions, Tito, Santana. So looking at 1980 for the Iron Sheik, the better known alias of the Great Hossein. Hossein's with Blassie here, where he debuts in 79, wins the first ever Battle Royal in Madison Square Garden, which I did not know. That is interesting. Had a championship shot at Bob Backlund, who beat him after 30 minutes. He feuded with Chief Jay Strongbow and Bruno Sammartino before leaving in 1980. So a short run. It doesn't have the months, but that's what brings the Sheik to this point. Of course, you know, he'll go on to be the World Wrestling Federation champion. What's interesting here, and I did not know, is that Santana's on his way out the door. Santana joined the World Wrestling Federation, defeating Mike Hall in his debut match on Championship Wrestling in 1979. Team with Ivan Putski to defeat the Valiants for the Tag Team Championship in October. The duo held the title for close to 4 months before losing, and I won't say who to because that'll be a spoiler for those watching along with us. But Santana leaves the WWF soon thereafter and goes to New Japan. And then he goes to the AWA from 80 to 82. He goes to Georgia Championship from 82 to 83. So as we go through, you know, we'll keep our eyes on Tito and what he's doing. Returns in 83. I did not know there was a lapse. I thought he was a WWF guy straight through. So these are the little Easter eggs that, you know, I'm nerding out for. So nerd alert right there. So match ends in a DQ. Kudos to both performers. It's crazy to see the Iron Sheik that nimble and that fast. So if you're an Iron Sheik fan, if you've seen him in the Gimmick Battle Royal, or even if you saw him in not past that run with Hogan, you know, like if you saw him in, you know, WCW in the late 80s or before he leaves WWF, you know, different guy. I see the Olympian here in him, the strength, the speed, the, you know, definite beast athlete. So, you know, watch out for him on Twitter because that stuff's probably pretty legit. One of the things, too, I noted, crowd differences. Man, older adults all throughout the crowd. Of course, this is pre-Hulkamania and, you know, before Vince gets control and starts marketing more towards, you know, different demographics. So just interesting to just see that, you know, discrepancy. Not a mix, even really, you know, just a completely different crowd. It's very visible. It's, the next matchup, Bill Berger versus Ken Patera, and I give it the shits because legitimately, and the idea that it gave me is, if you have a guy like that on your roster that's just supposed to be that strong, it's just like beastly compared to everybody else, let him win with the side headlock. Like he puts a side headlock on like right at the beginning, and you can see him wrenching it in. The guy's struggling. The guy just should have gave. You know, it's well before tapping out ever comes into play. But Should have been over there. What happens in between that and the full Nelson, I could have done without. Though, finisher beer, finisher alert for the full Nelson of Ken Patera being the first one ever in our proof of concept. So if you're drinking along with us, you can see I got mine right here. In 77, he challenges Bruno for the championship. There was a huge draw for that match. And then he also unsuccessfully challenged Backlund. And this is leading into where this then goes. So not a lot of history, not a lot of detail around Ken Patera. So maybe some of the other wrestling nerds need to jump on Wikipedia and get, a full breakdown of him year by year, the same way that we just had it for the Sheik or for Tito. Interview after. Patera's with the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard's a guy you always hear about, but a guy that I haven't seen a lot of, so I'm really excited. He didn't do too much here for me to, make a real opinion, but I will be interested to see more of him. Clearly a legendary manager, and I just have a soft spot in my heart for managers. I'm glad that they're back in AEW. I think that they do so much to enhance and elevate and a storyline and a performer. So I don't know why they ever got away from him, and I think probably that's part of the reason why guys aren't larger than life superstars now, is because they don't have that person to play off of, and that person that carries so much. In these days, the managers had so much, and that's why you see so many of them. Blassie's out in this show twice. Albano's out. The Grand Wizard's out, because being with those guys got you over instantly. Like, you had heat immediately just because people don't like the manager. So you can move into a new territory, and everybody knows this, but you go wherever, and based off the strength of that manager, you don't have to stay with them forever. There's a great dynamic in how that relationship bodes over time. But Bobby Heenan is the greatest heel of the 80s, period. That's, of course, based on when I start watching it, so maybe I'll have a different opinion by the time that we're done with this. But all the major storylines go through Heenan, and all the major players go through Heenan. There's exceptions, but instant credibility if you come in with Heenan. If you want to be a contender for any title, be part of a big feud, and have that extra level of contempt for the people that he was with. I agree that probably after Heenan and Jimmy Hart and Mr. Fuji and Slick and those guys leave, the next wave of guys, maybe even not through no fault of their own, don't have the same impact. So maybe there was a reason to get away from it for a while, but let's go back. Next up, another squash. This is full of heels squashing guys. This time it's Hogan versus two guys. So the same vehicle that they use for Ryback or Braun Strowman, they're using here in 1980. And you see it, oftentimes when getting over monster heels. And that's what Hogan is here. I mean, like, nothing but a monster heel. And Terry Funk introduces Hulk Hogan to Vincent J. McMahon, Vince Sr. Vince was impressed with his charisma and stature. We heard the story of him giving him the last name Hogan and the red hair dye. Hogan throws the red hair dye down the toilet because he was losing his hair, which is clear here in 1980. And we knew that anyway. So he starts on November 17th of that year. So what year? Oh, 79. Defeating Harry Valdez on Championship Wrestling. And then shortly thereafter, a little bit before we're at here, I presume, he makes his first appearance at Madison Square Garden, defeating Ted DiBiase with a bear hug. So again, like, the things that you can sniff out. Oh man, Hogan versus DiBiase in 79. Essentially here, he doesn't look that impressive. And Bruno kind of calls him out on it afterwards. So one of my mark out moment of the week, I'm going to make that a thing, is Bruno standing there with the mic to a young Hogan, and Hogan telling him that he is the guy of the 80s and that the old day is done. And Bruno saying, well, you're not a very good wrestler, and you might have power, but you don't know the wrestling holds. If there's anything from this show that I think should be clipped out and stand the test of time, it's a standalone YouTube clip for WWE. It's a piece of history. it's Bruno and Hogan. And maybe there's a whole bunch of Bruno and Hogan from before this, and maybe there'll be a whole bunch more. Make a supercut, because that is your Rushmore top guy of the 70s and your Rushmore top guy of the 80s. And Hogan is against Angelo Gomez and Ben Ortiz in the match. You know, it's probably, to me, the best squash on the show. Hogan was the over the head backbreaker, but you know, your bias probably because it's Hogan. He cuts a pretty good promo. I was interested in, you know, how much his promo would have changed, and you know, the voice is less gruff, and you know, all the catchphrases aren't there, but the charisma's there. He knows he knows his lane, and he's already working his way into it. Pretty good. One of the things that I noted is with the sports presentation, you recognize how little the commentators know about what they're talking about, which is weird because it's even Bruno. He says a lot of things that make no sense. You know, you just get done watching Tito and Sheik go back and forth on the ropes. He's like, they must have done that 6 times. Like, they did it twice. You know, like, you just watched it. And it's not just that. It's a number of different things. So, yeah, him and McMahon not gonna probably work their way into my favorite commentary teams of all time. Your next match, Larry Zbyszko versus Johnny Rodz. And so, you know, my primary knowledge of Larry Zbyszko probably is his WCW run as a wrestler and as a commentator. So, you know, as a member of the Dangerous Alliance, and, you know, some stuff that he did before that, he kind of would like go in and out. I think he's there in like 88, 89, but real brief. I know he's in the AWA. I'd watched Super Clash 1 last night, which was the shits. Zbyszko is in a 6-man tag on that. I don't know how to feel about Larry Zbyszko. I've never known how to feel about Larry Zbyszko. I respect Larry Zbyszko, but he's not somebody that I have personally really dug into watching. But this match against Johnny Rodz, I did not fast forward. Zbyszko, his style is, I don't know what the word is, unorthodox, maybe, if not erratic. Just the way his body moves, and I've always felt that way about him. Like, he just has like a weird stance almost, if that makes sense. So he's all over the place though, which keeps it entertaining. Johnny Rodz got in way more than I thought Johnny Rodz would. Johnny Rodz, I've never seen wrestle. My only understanding of Johnny Rodz is from when they put him in the Hall of Fame, and a lot of people were complaining because from a kayfabe standpoint, he didn't win a lot of matches during this time. So I respect that on both sides, why the fans don't want the people who don't make an impact from a television standpoint in their Hall of Fame, and why WWE says, no, the people who contributed to this company are the people that are going into the Hall of Fame. So both are valid to me. He is in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation from 73 to 81. So that's actually, I did not know that he had that long of a run. I thought that even his run with Sammartino was relatively kind of like him debuting on the national scene and then them going straight into that angle where he's like, Sammartino's his protege. And it's interesting too, because, you know, Sammartino's really talking that up here. They're all talking about, you know, what a great guy Larry is. But then there's this little nod at the end when they're going in next week about, oh, we'll try to get that interview with you and Zbyszko again, because he must not have heard you last time. And I'm like, oh, they're already in this angle. And I'm pretty excited about it. I've not seen it. I've seen the match at Shea, and without the story, it's not as impactful. He debuts in 73 as babyface Larry Zbyszko, a tribute to Stanislaus Zbyszko, appearing in the Pittsburgh area for Studio Wrestling. You know, one of the kind of the unsung Pittsburgh guys, because when people talk about Pittsburgh anymore, it's Angle or Shane Douglas that I hear, and you don't really hear people throwing out Zbyszko's name in that group as much. Zbyszko leaves in 75 and returns in 76 to team with Tony Gurria. They're WWF Tag Team Champions, which I did not know that. If you would have hard-pressed me, is Larry Zbyszko a WWF Tag Champ? And I like to consider myself a relatively knowledgeable wrestling guy, and I hope to not lose all credibility in the first episodes, but I'm talking about stuff that is new to me. So before I was born, they have a decent run from November of 78 to March of 79. Zbyszko feuds with Bugsy McGraw, Abdullah the Butcher, and Superstar Graham. Wrestles Killer Kowalski and Baron Mikhail Cicluna. He summarizes mat-based ring work with the statement, I believe in science over brawn. So, you know, you got to make a story if you're the guy who's not built like Hulk Hogan. So at the end of the decade, Zbyszko became frustrated with his inability to shed his label as Bruno's protege. Obviously, that's I guess maybe the Rushmore of Pittsburgh wrestling. Bruno, Zbyszko, Angle, Douglas. Leave something in the comments if you think that's not correct. If I'm missing a big Pittsburgh name, he challenges Sammartino to an exhibition match. I assume that is upcoming. I don't think that we are already there. So I'm not going to read any more of this. I wish it was compartmentalized a little bit better, so I knew I didn't get ahead of myself. But good match, and I'm interested to see what happens with Larry Zbyszko. So I'm not really, if I'm going back to the beginning of the show, Iron Sheik, I think he's going to have a cup of coffee, but I'm interested in it. Tito, fun to watch. Patera, that's going to be tough to get through. I think Hogan, going to be fun to watch. Zbyszko, going to be fun to watch, at least as we get through the Bruno stuff. And maybe I'll not be so condescending and Monday morning quarterback-ish after getting more familiar with his work from him in his prime, because what's fair on how to judge the guys that we saw in the 90s who had their heyday in the 70s and the early 80s. So Rods is in the WWF as far back as 1965. So yeah, I see why he's a Hall of Famer. His run is 20 years. It doesn't look like it's interrupted. Well, it says NWA Hollywood in the 70s. So he wrestles Bob Backlund at Madison Square Garden, would often tag with Jose Estrada, Frank the Gypsy Rodriguez. For much of the next 2 decades through mid-1985, he's a mainstay of the Federation, though largely used as enhancement talent. And he does wrestle with the Showdown at Shea coming up, and doing research is giving me spoilers. I maybe need to get a subscription to the backlogs of the Meltzer Observer so I can do this week by week. Most over person on the show, the recently deceased Pat Patterson, who does not make an appearance, but when Bobby Duncum Jr. comes out with Captain Lou Albano, oh man. The final match, I do not know Bobby Duncum outside of his son being Bobby Duncum Jr. of the West Texas Rednecks. This is my first time seeing Bobby Duncum Sr. Spitting image, his son is, and there is nothing. So if people really want to dive in and break his career out, it's basically that he's a heel cowboy, and he's wrestled some of the top babyface stars, including Backlund and Sammartino. I guess he does more stuff in the AWA. This has no breakdown of why he's here, how long he's here, what he's done before today, what he'll do after, but his match is not good. I did find myself having to fast forward through parts of it. He wins with a Bulldog, which is probably another finisher beer. I wouldn't know specifically. He was wrestling Ron Lee, which means nothing to me. So the show ends with the tease on the interview with Zbyszko next week with Sammartino, which is enough to keep me wanting to see that episode. I guess my concept for the show is maybe to go back and rate the guys, maybe figure out what the Madden system is, and start them all at like an 80 or an 85 and give them like a +1 or -1 or something, like get to see where they end up, as we go. Maybe start them at 50 and, on a scale of 100 and just move them up and down. Maybe there's a point system where it doesn't matter. I'm going to give Tito Santana 10 points. I'm going to give the great Hossein 5 points. I'm going to give, Ken Patera -2. I don't know. But something where I kind of get like some kind of idea of parity amongst the guys and also like their stock over time, like, are they going up? Are they going down? Like how are they prepared? How are they performing, compared to what we see? We're going to see Tito Santana, all his highs and lows all over the place. We're going to see Hulk Hogan ascend to the top of the mountain. We're going to see him descend and reascend. Yeah, some things need to be figured out about format and like slap a thing at the end of it or something. But I don't think it's a watch along, and I don't think it's like a talking while we're watching. But I think we watch something, we recap it. If there's nothing really worth talking about, we don't have to talk about it, especially once we've seen these guys, a few times. Oh, it's another Bobby Duncum match or something, so maybe some of the episodes are 2 shows because there's not as much going on or, whatever. But, if Showdown at Shea is the starting point, or maybe a month out from that show or something like that, just watch it, give a little profiles of the guys, talk a little bit about the aesthetic of the show, talk about the things that are noticeable, about the changes in the production, the changes in the way that they speak about certain things. You know, leading into McMahon taking over the company and the changes that he's going to ultimately make. And not that much content from the 70s on there, but I don't think I'd enjoy. At this point, I don't think I have any interest. So I think, like, in order to make the project move, you have to start at a point that you're interested in. And I'm not sure that I knew that I was interested in 1980, but this show, you know, it's not something I recommend anybody run out and watch. It's not anything that you're missing. I think it'd be good if they chopped out that Hogan Sammartino interview, you know, for consumption, but there's nothing else here, you know, that's really moving storyline or a real, you know, moment that needs to be called out that's been forgotten or anything like that. But it was a nice little place to start with a lot of performers that I did know, and it'll be interesting to see how they get to where I jump on, and it'll be great to cover and relive when I get to that stage. But right now it's kind of cool being new and, you know, piecing things together and learning more as I read, and just enjoying watching wrestling. So I don't really have a closer yet, but this is the idea. So I'm going to shut it off now. Lord knows how long it is. And hopefully there's enough here for you to decide that, oh, I would change this, I would tweak this, I would add this, I would add this, I'd bookend it like that. And then we can be off to the races.